Reality isn't what you've been told, it's what you've been kept from knowing. From the moment you opened your eyes, you were given a script, a name, a nationality, a religion, a system of beliefs that shaped the limits of your imagination long before you ever had a chance to question it. But behind the veil of this world lies a forgotten map, a hidden blueprint that was never meant for your eyes, a code passed down in whispers, buried in temples, and encrypted in ancient scrolls. Its author, Thoth, the Atlantean, the architect of wisdom, the scribe of the gods. He didn't just speak in riddles, he left keys, principles so powerful they could bend time, dissolve illusion, and awaken the divine within you. They weren't myths, they were mechanics, not poetry but physics of the soul. The teachings of Thoth aren't stories to admire, they are instructions to activate. If you've ever felt like there was more to life, more behind the chaos, more beyond the surface, then you're already feeling the pull of a truth your spirit has never forgotten. Everything you see, hear, touch, or believe, it's all happening in one place, your mind. Not just the personal mind, but the infinite, underlying field that we're all immersed in. Thoth called it the All, the root of all creation. Before matter, before sound, before time itself, there was mind. Not as an abstract thought, but as the source code of existence. And here's the truth they don't want you to realize. You are not inside reality. Reality is inside you. This is the first and most important of all Hermetic laws, the principle of mentalism. All is mind. The universe itself is a mental construct. That means what you perceive as solid, separate, and external is really a projection, like a dream that's been mistaken for waking life. You think you're reacting to the world, but in truth, you're shaping it, constantly, silently, and often unconsciously. You are not a passenger on a cosmic train. You are the projector in the booth, but you've been taught the opposite your entire life. You were conditioned to believe that life just happens to you, that the outside world is fixed, and you are simply here to respond to it. Be a good citizen, obey the rules, chase approval, suppress desire, don't ask too many questions. But this belief system isn't just disempowering, it's blinding. Because once you accept that reality is objective and absolute, you surrender your creative power. You become an effect, not a cause. Thoth taught that the physical world is like smoke trailing from the fire of thought. Change the fire, change the smoke. Everything begins in the mind. Every structure, every invention, every empire, every war, every act of love, it all originated as a thought. That's how powerful your mind is. And it's why those in control invest so heavily in controlling what you think. The narratives you're fed, the fears you're sold, the desires you're implanted with. They don't shape reality, they shape you. And through you, reality bends. Now here's where it gets real. If all is mind, then your mind is not separate from the all. You're not just connected to source, you are a localized expression of it. The all does not divide itself. It reflects itself through form, which means you are not just a fragment of consciousness. You are consciousness itself, experiencing limitations so that it can grow. You're here not to submit to reality, but to learn how to master it. You are not powerless. You are participating. But participation without awareness is slavery. And that's why mentalism is both a warning and a weapon. Because if you don't command your mind, someone else will. If you don't become the author of your inner world, your story will be written for you. And it already has, by your upbringing, your media, your education, your trauma. But those scripts can be rewritten. That's the true alchemy of mind. You're not stuck with the thoughts you've been given. You can choose new ones, and in doing so, choose a new world. Some truths are too ancient and too suppressed to be shared here. Join Insights Academy in the link below and get exclusive teachings we can't discuss on YouTube, plus a free copy of The Kybalion. This is the real secret behind the phrase, mind over matter. Not just motivation, speak, but a literal formula. Mind precedes matter. Thought creates form. Perception molds experience. When you think something consistently, it begins to crystallize, from mental to emotional to physical. Your beliefs aren't passive. They are the blueprints through which the invisible becomes visible. You think, therefore it becomes. That's why fear manifests chaos and faith creates clarity. It's not metaphysics, it's mechanics. This also means your circumstances are not as fixed as they seem. You are not bound by your past unless you continue to believe its story. Trauma, failure, conditioning, they only hold power in a mind that refuses to reframe. The all is mind. But your mind, it's the chisel that shapes the clay of the cosmos. Master it, and nothing is beyond reach. Ignore it, and you become shaped by those who have already mastered theirs. This is where the journey begins, not with a chant, or a crystal, or a ritual, but with the realization that the world is mental and the mind is sovereign. And once you reclaim that sovereignty, reality stops being a prison and becomes a playground. That's the first key Thoth handed down. All is mind, and if all is mind, then freedom begins in thought. Power begins in thought, and the rebirth of your world begins the moment you start thinking for yourself. There is no separation. That's the second secret they never wanted you to understand. The universe isn't made of isolated parts. It's a mirror, endlessly folding in on itself, reflecting the same pattern in every direction. Thoth called this truth the law of correspondence. As above, so below. As within, so without. What appears to be different is actually identical at different scales. The stars above are not distant, they are your thoughts expressed in light. Your heartbeat mirrors the pulse of the cosmos. Your breath follows the same rhythm as galaxies expanding and collapsing. You are not separate from the universe. You are a miniature of it, a fractal, a divine echo of the whole. This isn't philosophy. It's physics disguised as mysticism. Look closer at nature, and you'll see it everywhere. Spiral galaxies and snail shells, river deltas and neural networks, lightning bolts and root systems. The micro reflects the macro. It's all one grand pattern speaking through infinite forms. Sacred geometry doesn't just look beautiful, it encodes how reality organizes itself. This law of correspondence is not a poetic metaphor. It's a blueprint, a code written into the bones of everything. Your body is a temple not just in symbolism but in design. Your spine is the staff of Hermes. Your chakras are planetary gates. The fluids in your body move with the moon. Hormonal cycles follow lunar phases. Even your DNA, the instruction manual of your being, spirals like the Milky Way. We're walking reflections of the cosmos, carrying stardust in our cells and constellations in our stories. You are not some random flesh and bone creature trapped on a rock in space. You are the cosmos, localized, encoded, and experiencing itself through form. You are starlight slowed down into matter, divine pattern in temporary shape. And once you realize this, once you really feel it, you stop looking outward for meaning and start recognizing that the answer has always been buried in the mirror. Not the one in your bathroom, but the infinite mirror of existence that stares back through every encounter, every trigger, every season of your life. You are a feedback loop. What you project returns to you. What you withhold is mirrored in what you lack. What you resist persists not because the universe is punishing you, but because it's trying to show you something about yourself. This is where true self-awareness begins, not in books, but in reflection. This is why ancient mystics and initiates didn't just study the heavens, they studied themselves. The two were inseparable. They knew the sky wasn't just weather, it was a message. They tracked stars to understand thought. They read planetary transits as archetypal shifts in consciousness. And when they said, "As above, so below," they weren't just speaking astrologically. They were issuing a warning. If you corrupt the inner world, the outer follows. If you heal the inner, the outer transforms. The world you see is a map of the world you've made within. This is why self-mastery is the highest science. Not because it's noble, but because it's causal. The structure of your life isn't accidental. It's a reflection of your current energetic architecture. You don't attract what you want, you attract what you are. You don't change the world by forcing it. You change it by shifting your frequency and allowing the mirror to update itself. Heal your relationship with your past, and your future realigns. Shift your thoughts, and your timeline bends. This is why you can't separate spiritual work from the real world. The real world is the projection of the spiritual. The political, financial, emotional chaos we experience on the collective level isn't random. It's the outer echo of a humanity in internal conflict. If you want to change the system, you must first change the pattern it's reflecting. And that means going inward, not to escape, but to recalibrate. As above, so below. As within, so without. You are the fractal key. You are the portal. And when you realize that every dimension, every timeline, and every outcome is encoded within your own design, you stop searching for power out there and start activating the divine code within. Everything moves. Everything vibrates. Nothing in this universe is truly still. Not your body, not your thoughts, not your emotions, not the space between stars. Even what seems solid is just vibration slowed to a frequency your senses can register. This was one of Thoth's greatest revelations, that at the core of all matter, energy, and even consciousness itself, is frequency. Vibration is the language of reality. And the quality of your vibration determines the quality of your life. But that's only the beginning. Because vibration doesn't just describe things, it controls them. Raise it, and your reality shifts. Lower it, and everything around you seems to collapse. This is the real secret behind why some people seem to carry a magnetic aura while others feel perpetually drained. They're not lucky, they're vibrating differently. But the system you were born into taught you to ignore this. It taught you to be logical, mechanical, numb to the signals of energy. It made you believe that emotion is weakness, intuition is fantasy, and sensitivity is something to medicate. Why? Because a society trained to feel less is easier to control. If you can't feel your frequency, you can't raise it. And if you can't raise it, you'll never break free. Thoth knew this. That's why he didn't just teach vibration, he taught polarity. Because every frequency exists on a spectrum, high and low, light and dark, love and fear, not opposites, but extremes of the same thing. Hot and cold are both temperatures. Joy and grief are both emotions. The key isn't to eliminate one or worship the other, but to understand that mastery comes from knowing where you are on the scale and learning how to move. The ability to shift your emotional and mental frequency is the beginning of energy alchemy. And once you learn it, you become the one thing the system fears most: unpredictable. Because the world around you thrives on keeping you at low vibration. News headlines keep you in fear. Entertainment keeps you in distraction. Food keeps you inflamed. Relationships, if unconscious, keep you entangled in loops. And the more reactive you become, the lower your field vibrates. That's not an accident, it's design. Low-frequency humans are easier to manage, easier to divide, easier to sell to. When you're vibrating at guilt, shame, anger, or apathy, your perception narrows. You become easy to herd. You stop imagining, you stop questioning, you just survive. But shift your frequency, and everything begins to move. Not just your mood, but your timeline. Raise your vibration through breath, stillness, movement, sound, intention, and suddenly, old patterns break. Toxic people fall away. New ideas flood in. Synchronicities accelerate. The world doesn't change, but how it responds to you does. Because you've changed. Your frequency has become your firewall. Polarity mastery also means understanding that challenges aren't punishments, they're invitations. Pain and pleasure are two sides of the same energetic scale. Where there is tension, there is transformation. If you avoid discomfort, you stay stuck. But if you transmute it, if you learn to turn fear into focus, grief into gratitude, anger into action, you become your own healer, your own initiator, your own alchemist. The ancient initiates weren't just spiritual, they were skilled in emotional transmutation. They knew that by mastering their inner polarity, they could remain centered while the world spiraled. They didn't react, they responded. Not because they were cold, but because they were aware. Emotional mastery doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you don't drown. You observe, you understand, and you decide how to transmute the current. So next time you feel overwhelmed, don't ask, "Why is this happening to me?" Ask, "Where am I vibrating?" The answer won't just explain your experience, it will empower you to shift it. Because when you move your frequency, the universe adjusts its reflection. That's not wishful thinking. That's Hermetic law. Polarity and vibration are not abstract teachings. They are survival tools in a world built to keep you numb. Learn them, and you stop being a victim of energy, you become its master. Nothing happens by accident. That's not a comforting idea. It's a confrontational one, because it means every moment, every relationship, every repetition in your life has a cause. Not always obvious, but always present. The universe isn't random, it's precise. And until you understand this law, until you embody it, you'll stay stuck in cycles that feel like fate, not realizing you're walking the same karmic loop wearing a different face, a different job, a different story. Thoth called this the law of cause and effect. Not punishment, not divine wrath, just pattern in motion. Everything you think, do, feel, believe, it all creates ripples. Most of those ripples go unnoticed, but they don't disappear. They loop, they echo, and eventually they return. This is karma, not a scoreboard in the sky, but the magnetic pull of energy returning to its source. You send out anger, you attract chaos. You emit doubt, you experience stagnation. You operate from fear, and life becomes a mirror of everything you're trying to avoid. But the problem is deeper than reaction. The real trap is unconsciousness. It's not what you're doing, it's that you don't realize you're doing it. The majority of people live as effects. Their entire life is a reaction to something external. Wake up, check the news, react. Get cut off in traffic, react. Open social media, compare, judge, spiral, react. Life becomes a series of emotional triggers that someone else pulls. And because they're reacting, they believe the world is happening to them. But it's not. It's responding to them. Their inner state is the invisible cause, and their experience is just the visible effect. But if you're not aware of the cause, you'll misinterpret the effect every time. This is how karma loops are formed. Not just across lifetimes, but within a single day. The same relationship patterns, the same financial struggles, the same fears wearing different masks. You're not cursed, you're consistent. You keep thinking the same way, so you keep choosing the same energy. And the universe, being neutral and exact, keeps giving you the matching result. That's not cruelty, that's clarity. The only way out of this loop is to become the cause. That's what Thoth taught the initiates, to step out of reaction and into creation. When you become the conscious initiator of thought, emotion, and action, you override the program. You stop being pushed by invisible forces and start directing them. You don't wait for the world to change. You change your frequency, and the world recalibrates. This isn't about controlling every detail. It's about owning your influence. You don't get to choose what shows up in life, but you get to choose how you meet it. That choice is everything. When you meet chaos with presence instead of panic, you disrupt the karmic script. When you meet betrayal with boundaries instead of revenge, you shift the pattern. These aren't spiritual cliches. They are energetic interventions. You're cutting the thread that ties you to old timelines. The most powerful beings don't control others. They control their response. That's true sovereignty. It's not flashy. It's not loud. It's a quiet mastery that ripples through every layer of your life. And once you start living this way, owning your inner cause, you become untouchable. Not because life stops testing you, but because you no longer break when it does. You've stepped out of the loop. When you do this, Karma no longer feels like a sentence. It becomes your teacher. Every experience becomes feedback. Every trigger becomes a clue. You stop blaming and you start decoding. You see the patterns, not the punishment. And eventually, the loops slow down. The noise fades. Because you've stopped adding fuel to the fire. You're not feeding the past anymore. You're forming something new. This is what Thoth meant by escaping the wheel. It's not about abandoning the world. It's about mastering your position in it. Becoming the still point in the spiral. Being the observer and the creator at once. It's not easy, but it's the only path to true freedom. And the choice is always in front of you. React or respond. Loop or liberate. Effect or cause. One path repeats, the other transforms. You've been here before. You've felt it in moments you can't explain. The déjà vu, the strange familiarity in someone's eyes, the irrational fear that doesn't match your life story. It's not imagination, it's memory. A memory buried deep beneath layers of conditioning and distraction. Thoth didn't just speak of physical reality, he mapped the soul's journey through lifetimes, through lessons, through dimensions. Reincarnation isn't a myth or a belief system. It's a function of the universe, a cycle of energetic refinement. And you, whether you realize it or not, are in the middle of that cycle. Every lifetime is a chapter, not a beginning. You're not here for the first time. You're here because there is something you came back to complete, to correct, or to carry forward. Your soul is not linear. It is layered. It collects data, experiences, emotional imprints, and karmic patterns across every incarnation. And if those patterns aren't resolved, they repeat. Not out of cruelty, but precision. You cannot escape a lesson until it's integrated. That's not punishment. That's the mechanics of soul evolution. Most people live as if life is a single roll of the dice. One shot, one chance, one death. But when you believe life is limited, you fear failure. You grip tightly to identity. You avoid risk. You trade curiosity for safety. But the ancient initiates knew the truth. Death isn't the end. It's a doorway. And what lies beyond isn't heaven or hell. It's transition, realignment, re-entry. The halls of Amenti, as Thoth described them, are not some mythical underworld. They are the inner chamber of the soul's initiation. A space outside linear time, where the soul reflects, recalibrates, and prepares for what comes next. But here's the part most people miss. You don't have to die to access that space. The halls exist within you, encoded in your own consciousness. Every time you enter deep stillness, every time you journey inward with intention, you come closer to that eternal part of yourself that remembers. It remembers the lives you've lived, the choices you made, the lessons you refused to learn, and the agreements you made to come back. You're not here by accident. You chose this incarnation, not for comfort, but for transformation. You chose your wounds. You chose your challenges. You chose the environment that would most efficiently bring your patterns to the surface. That doesn't make your pain less real. It makes it meaningful. Because when you understand that your soul chose this life not to suffer, but to awaken, everything changes. Victimhood dissolves. Blame softens. And purpose begins to emerge. You stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What is this showing me?" Reincarnation is not just about returning, it's about remembering. Every lifetime builds on the last. Skills, fears, relationships, they echo forward. That's why some people seem to be born wise. Why some are drawn to ancient texts, healing work, spiritual paths from an early age. They're not starting, they're continuing. They've done this before, so have you. And the more you remember, the faster you evolve. Because soul growth is not measured in years, it's measured in integration. But the system you were born into distracts you from this. It keeps you chasing success, accumulating things, competing for validation. All of that noise buries the signal of your soul. It makes you forget who you were and why you came. That's not by chance, it's by design. A sleeping soul is easier to manipulate. But the moment you begin to remember, the cycle begins to break. You stop repeating, and you start refining. This is the hidden purpose behind reincarnation, not to trap you, but to free you through self-mastery. Each life is another chance to embody more truth, more awareness, more alignment. Not perfection, just progression, until eventually you no longer need to come back. Not because you're done, but because you've remembered who you are, an eternal, sovereign being, choosing experience over and over again to refine your frequency. And that's where true liberation begins, not when you escape the cycle, but when you participate in it consciously. When you meet every challenge as a returning lesson, every person as a familiar mirror, every decision as a soul-level choice, you begin to live with purpose, not pressure, with remembrance, not regret. And slowly, lifetime by lifetime, the soul becomes whole again. Not new, just fully remembered. You were never meant to decay. That was never the plan. The ancient teachings don't speak of death as a destination, but as a frequency collapse, a disconnection from your original design. Thoth didn't promise immortality as a fantasy. He revealed it as a natural function of alignment, not in the sense of living forever in the same body, but in the understanding that your being is light first, matter second. And light, when activated, doesn't die. It transcends. The body you wear is not your prison, it's your vessel. A temporary construct designed to house your consciousness as it navigates density. But that vessel is programmable, moldable, and when aligned with certain frequencies, through breath, intention, purity, and vibration, it begins to shift. It becomes lighter, more crystalline, less bound by time. This is what the ancients meant by the light body, not just energy around you, but a transformation from within. A physiological and energetic recalibration that turns the body into a bridge between dimensions. We've been taught to see aging as normal, disease as inevitable, but that's not nature, it's programming. Your biology isn't broken, it's just forgotten. The light body isn't fiction. It's a state of being that occurs when the density of your thoughts, emotions, and habits are replaced with higher frequencies of truth, love, and coherence. The more light you hold, the more you begin to override the slow death of the default timeline. Thoth became what many called the twice-born, not because he escaped death once, but because he mastered the cycles entirely. He achieved energetic mastery to the point where he could choose to stay or go, not as a spirit ripped from flesh, but as a conscious transmission of light-shifting form. And this wasn't his gift alone. It was the inheritance of all those willing to do the inner alchemy required. The refinement of thought, the purification of emotion, the conscious transformation of shadow into radiance. It wasn't magic. It was memory. You don't attain immortality by resisting death. You attain it by transmuting density. When you release the emotional weights, the karmic patterns, the illusions of separation, you begin to dissolve the contracts that bind you to entropy. The body, once a slave to time, becomes a conductor of timelessness. You feel it in flashes now, in deep meditation, in the stillness of awe, in moments where your awareness expands beyond your name. That's the light body calling you home. It's already within you, waiting to be activated. This is the sacred science hidden in plain sight. Every chakra is a portal, every meridian a river of light, every breath a code. You don't need to become more. You need to shed what you're not. The foods you eat, the thoughts you repeat, the emotions you suppress, they either build the light body or bury it. You are either feeding immortality or accelerating decay. And most of us, unknowingly, have been doing the latter, because no one told us the truth, that we are self-regenerating systems governed by energy, not just biology. But now you know, and with that knowledge comes responsibility. To become lighter, not just for yourself, but for the collective grid, because every person who activates their light body contributes to the awakening of the whole. You become a transmitter, a stabilizer, a lighthouse in the chaos. And that energy doesn't just uplift others, it protects you. The more light you hold, the harder it becomes for lower frequencies to enter your field. Pain passes through, but it no longer takes root. Fear visits, but it doesn't stay. You move through the world not untouched, but undefeated. Immortality isn't about evading death. It's about mastering life, about remembering that you are an eternal being playing in a temporary form. The teachings of Thoth weren't meant to be worshipped. They were meant to be embodied. And this one is clear. When you become light, you transcend death, not as an escape, but as an evolution. Not in resistance, but in radiance. This is not a myth. It's the return of your original design, and it begins the moment you stop fearing your decay and start activating your light. The world you see isn't the only one that exists. In fact, it's barely a fragment. The third dimension, what we call reality, is simply the most dense, slow-moving layer of consciousness. It's the one you were born into, conditioned by, and taught to believe is the limit of possibility. But Thoth never saw this world as a boundary. He saw it as a starting point, a base camp in a vast range of unseen peaks. Higher dimensions are not fantasy, they are structure. Layers of reality stacked on top of each other, vibrating faster, housing forms of intelligence and consciousness we've been conditioned to ignore, fear, or ridicule. From birth, you've been trained to perceive only through your five senses, to believe that if you can't touch it, it isn't real, that if it can't be measured, it can't be true. But every mystic, sage, initiate, and seer throughout history has said the same thing. The visible world is the shadow. The real action happens in the unseen. And once you begin to raise your frequency through thought, intention, vibration, and awareness, you start to pierce that veil. Not with your eyes, but with your consciousness. And once you do, you can't unsee it. Thoth taught that these higher realms aren't above you, they are within you. You don't reach them by leaving Earth or escaping the body. You reach them by refining your energy and expanding your perception. The third dimension is ruled by time, form, separation, and linear cause and effect. But move beyond it, and suddenly time becomes flexible. Space becomes fluid. Thought becomes movement. You begin to experience reality as it truly is. Interconnected, multidimensional, participatory. You're not here to escape the third dimension. You're here to learn from it, master it, and then move through it with full awareness of the others. Dreams are one of the ways we access these realms, but most people dismiss them as nonsense. They're not. Dreams are multidimensional experiences, filtered through symbolic language, astral projection, lucid dreaming, deep meditation. These aren't spiritual side quests. They're training grounds. The more conscious you become in these spaces, the more you reclaim your full awareness as a multidimensional being. Because you are not bound to this body, you are simply tuned to this frequency. And just like a radio, you can shift the dial. Symbols are the language of these higher planes. Sacred geometry, ancient glyphs, visual mantras. They don't just look meaningful, they are keys. They bypass the logical mind and speak directly to the subconscious and energetic fields. This is why ancient temples were covered in symbols, why initiates meditated on sigils, why mantras and tones were used in sacred rites. These weren't rituals for tradition's sake. They were tools to tune the mind and body to higher bandwidths of reality. You don't decode higher realms through intellect, you enter them through resonance. We've been taught that this is all imagination, but imagination is the access point. It's not childish, it's sacred. It's the interface between your conscious mind and the rest of existence. When you allow yourself to imagine new realities, new dimensions, new ways of being, you're not escaping, you're remembering, tapping into layers that have always been there, waiting for your awareness to catch up. But there's resistance. The third density is sticky. It pulls you into survival, into fear, into distraction. That's the test. Can you hold your expanded vision in a world addicted to contraction? Can you access higher awareness while navigating a physical life? That's the real ascension, not floating away from the world, but walking through it with light in your eyes and power in your step. Multidimensional awareness doesn't disconnect you, it reconnects you. To source, to self, to everything. There are realms beyond this one, frequencies your senses don't yet perceive, beings that don't need form to exist, futures that haven't happened yet, and memories you haven't lived. All of it is here, layered around you like concentric spheres, and the key to unlocking them has always been within you. The teachings of Thoth weren't written to entertain, they were designed to awaken. Not your beliefs, but your perception. You are not just in the third dimension. You are the third dimension evolving into the fourth, the fifth, and beyond. Not as a timeline, but as a state of being. And when you align your vibration with truth, intention, and conscious action, you begin to shift. Reality bends. The veil thins. And the world you once thought was all there was begins to dissolve into something much, much greater. Creation isn't random. It's coded. It's mathematical. It's intelligent design hiding in plain sight. Every tree, every snowflake, every shell, every galaxy, it's all built from the same divine architecture. Thoth didn't just study this, he mapped it. Sacred geometry wasn't decoration to him. It was the blueprint of the universe, the purest language of creation. Before there was language, before there was even sound, there was shape, form, pattern, consciousness made visible. Look at the flower of life, not just as a symbol, but as a mechanism. It holds within it the patterns of atoms, the proportions of planets, the structure of your DNA. The ancients didn't draw these shapes for fun. They carved them into temples because they understood them as keys. Every circle, every intersection, every ratio is a reflection of divine order. This is not just about beauty, it's about truth. Sacred geometry is the signature of source, repeating itself across every scale, from the microscopic to the cosmic. Your body is part of this design. Your eyes follow the golden ratio. Your hands hold the Fibonacci sequence. The spiral of your cochlea echoes the spiral of a hurricane. This is not metaphor, it's instruction. The universe builds with precision. It unfolds through laws, not luck. And when you understand those laws, you stop seeing chaos and start seeing coherence. You realize that you're not separate from the world. You're shaped by the same hand that shaped the stars. Thoth taught that geometry was the interface between the spiritual and the physical, a portal, a bridge. The symbol wasn't just symbolic, it was energetic. When you meditate on a mandala or trace a spiral, you're not just contemplating beauty. You're aligning your frequency with the fundamental blueprint of life. You're tuning yourself to the rhythm of the cosmos. That's why geometry appears in ancient art, architecture, and mystery schools across all cultures. It's not cultural coincidence, it's a universal truth. Even sound follows geometry. Cymatics, patterns formed by sound vibrations, reveal how frequencies create form. Play a pure tone over a surface covered in sand, and it will arrange itself into complex, symmetrical patterns. Change the frequency, and the pattern changes. That's sacred geometry in action. Vibration creating structure, energy becoming matter, just like the mind creates reality, just like intention shapes outcome. It's all the same law, expressed through different mediums. When you see these symbols, they speak to a part of you that remembers. Not your logical mind, but your ancient self, the part of you that has walked in temples, stood beneath pyramids, traced symbols in sand, long before this life. The part of you that knows these shapes are not new, only forgotten, because sacred geometry is not external knowledge, it's soul memory. And here's the deeper truth. They are not just maps of how things are made. They are also codes for how to create. Geometry holds creation instructions, how to build harmony, how to stabilize energy, how to unlock consciousness. You don't need to read them, you need to resonate with them. When you surround yourself with these forms, or visualize them, or move in their patterns, you begin to rewire your own structure. Your field shifts, your cells align. You become more coherent, more whole, more awake. This is why distorted environments, ugly architecture, chaotic design, artificial symmetry create stress. Your body knows they're not true. It senses the incoherence, and it reacts. We were never meant to live inside straight lines and fluorescent lights. We were meant to live inside pattern, proportion, rhythm. That's what sacred geometry is. Not mysticism, not abstraction, just the return to the original template. Thoth didn't just teach sacred geometry for the sake of intellectual pursuit. He offered it as a way home, a way to remember your place in the great structure. Because once you see the code, you realize you are the code. And once you live in alignment with that code, through thought, action, design, and presence, life stops feeling like chaos and starts revealing its deep, underlying order. You were never meant to feel lost. The map has always been here, not drawn in ink, but carved into nature, etched into your cells, encoded in the very structure of existence. Sacred geometry isn't just the design of life, it's the invitation to step back into it, consciously, fully, with awe and intention. Because when you move in alignment with the blueprint, creation doesn't resist you, it responds to you. You were never meant to forget. You were never meant to live in the dark, fumbling for purpose in a world designed to keep you small. Thoth didn't leave his teachings behind so they could sit in dusty libraries or be diluted into bedtime myths. He left them as blueprints for awakening, for you. Every principle, every symbol, every so-called myth was encoded for a reason, to activate something dormant inside you, something ancient, something powerful. You felt it before, the tug, the restlessness, the sense that there's more than this daily grind, this illusion of separation, this race for validation. That's not just curiosity, that's a memory. That's the soul stirring from a long slumber. Thoth didn't just teach immortality to escape death. He taught it to reveal truth, that your consciousness is eternal, that the light within you cannot be extinguished by time or trauma. Immortality, to him, wasn't about escaping this world, but fully inhabiting it as a being of light, to move through dimensions consciously, to walk between worlds, to carry wisdom through lifetimes. And this isn't a metaphor, it's a directive. You are not here to be a passive participant. You are here to awaken the creator within. But the world you were born into was built to make you forget. From birth, you were conditioned to doubt your inner knowing, schooled to memorize and repeat instead of question and feel, distracted by flashing screens, drained by empty work, and told that fulfillment lies somewhere out there, in the job, the relationship, the possession. But it doesn't. It never has. It lives in remembering, in unlearning, in reconnecting to the sacred principles that have been hidden in plain sight. Mentalism shows you that reality begins in thought. The law of one reminds you that all is connected. Polarity, vibration, rhythm, cause and effect, all are tools not to manipulate the world, but to master your relationship with it. This was never about controlling others. It's always been about sovereignty, about understanding that the universe responds not to who you pretend to be, but to the frequency you truly hold. And here's what they won't tell you. Once you step into that power, the system loses control over you. You stop chasing meaning and start generating it. You stop outsourcing truth and start living it. You become dangerous, not in the way the world fears, but in the way systems fear. Because you can no longer be manipulated by fear, shame, or scarcity. And that's when real freedom begins. Not the freedom of permission, but the freedom of being. But awakening doesn't mean you ascend into bliss and leave the world behind. It means you return to it, eyes wide open, heart on fire, carrying the teachings not as theories, but as embodied truth. Because when you live them, when you speak from alignment, act from clarity, and hold the vibration of truth, you light the path for others. And that's what Thoth ultimately meant by illumination. becoming the light that reveals the way. And that's what the system fears the most. Not a rebellion of fists, but a revolution of minds. That's why these teachings have been ridiculed, hidden, rebranded, or sold back to you in fragments. But truth doesn't die. It waits. And when you're ready, it returns like a whisper from the depths, reminding you that everything you need is already within you. Most people will live their entire lives disconnected from this wisdom, sleepwalking through a reality that was handed to them. But you're here. You've seen the signs. You've felt the pull. And now you have a choice. Do you keep walking the path laid out for you? Or do you step off it and reclaim the one you were always meant to walk? The teachings are alive. They move through you. The question is, what will you do with them? If this resonated with you, and you know you're ready for the deeper layers, the things we can't speak about openly, you need to join our free newsletter, Insights Academy. Some knowledge is too sacred for platforms like this. Subscribe through the link in the description, and you'll also receive a free digital copy of the Kybalion, but only for a limited time. Your awakening is not just for you. When you rise, you lift others. When you break the spell, you create space for truth to enter the collective. We're not here to survive. We're here to remember, to expand, and to build a new world rooted in ancient wisdom. Insights Academy is where that revolution continues. Off the screen, beyond the noise. If you're still watching and you don't sign up, you're not just missing out. You're turning your back on a path your soul has been calling you toward. Sign up now. This is your time. If this video resonated with you, let us know by commenting, "I understood it."